If you've ever thought Passover was just a Jewish holiday, just an ancient tradition tucked away in the Old Testament, something cultural but not personal, think again. Passover is not just a meal. It's not just history. It's not just a ritual. Passover is a rescue story written in blood. It's a blueprint. It's a warning. It's a prophecy. It was the night death moved through the streets of Egypt, and one thing determined who lived and who died. Blood. Not just any blood. The blood of a spotless lamb painted on wood. Does that sound familiar? This wasn't random. It wasn't symbolic poetry added later. It was a message etched into history, designed to echo all the way to a hill called Calvary. And yet, in modern faith, we often rush past the night that changed everything. So let's go back. Back to Egypt. Back to the tension in the air. Back to families huddled inside their homes, trusting that blood on a doorframe was enough to stop death itself. And we ask the question, what if life and death still come down to one door and one choice? The night death passed over wasn't the beginning of the story, it was the climax. Before there was blood on doorposts, there were chains. Israel had been enslaved for 400 years. Generations were born into bondage. They built cities they would never own. They carried bricks under whips. They lived under a system designed to erase their identity. And for centuries, it looked like Egypt was winning. Until God broke the silence. He didn't negotiate with Pharaoh. He didn't whisper. He sent Moses with a command. Let my people go. Pharaoh refused. And plague after plague shattered the illusion of Egypt's power. The Nile turned to blood. The skies rained hail and fire. Darkness swallowed the land. Every plague exposed a false god. Every plague revealed who truly ruled. But Pharaoh's heart stayed hard. And sometimes so does ours. Because this story isn't just about ancient Egypt. It's about every system, addiction, fear, and lie that enslaves us today. It's about the pharaohs we tolerate, the chains we justify, the bondage we normalize. Before freedom, there is confrontation. Before deliverance, there is a demand. Let my people go. Then came the final instruction. Not to Pharaoh, but to the slaves. Each family was to choose a lamb. Not the weak one, not the leftover. A spotless lamb without blemish. This wasn't about dinner. This was substitution. The lamb would stand in the place of the firstborn. And it wasn't enough to admire the lamb. It had to be slain. Its blood had to be collected. And then applied publicly, visibly, to the wood of the doorframe. The message was clear. Without the blood, you are not covered. It didn't matter if you were born Hebrew. It didn't matter if you knew the covenant. It didn't matter if you believed intellectually. If the blood was not applied, the house was not safe. That night death moved through Egypt. And where there was blood, it passed over. Centuries later, another Passover approached. Jerusalem was crowded, lambs were being selected, families prepared to remember Egypt. And into that city rode a man on a donkey. On the very days lambs were being inspected, heaven presented its own. Jesus without blemish. Tested, tempted, untouched by sin. He gathered with his disciples for the Passover meal. The unleavened bread sat on the table, the bitter herbs, the cup of wine. They thought they were remembering the Exodus. But he was about to fulfill it. He lifted the bread. This is my body. He lifted the cup. This is my blood. The lamb was no longer on the table. The lamb was at the table. Within hours he would hang on wood. Blood not brushed with hyssop, but poured from thorns, nails, and a spear. The plague was never just Pharaoh. The plague was sin. And the cure was blood. Passover also included unleavened bread, bread without yeast. No time to rise, no time to delay. Deliverance was urgent. Leaven in Scripture often represents sin, something small that spreads and corrupts the whole. God was teaching them. Freedom requires leaving corruption behind. Freedom requires movement. Freedom doesn't wait for comfort. Then there were the bitter herbs. They had to taste the bitterness of slavery. Not to relive trauma, but to remember rescue. Memory shapes identity. God commanded them. This day shall be a memorial throughout your generations. They were not allowed to forget, because forgetting leads to drifting, and drifting leads back to Egypt. And we too have been given a memorial. On the night he was betrayed, Jesus transformed Passover into something deeper. Do this in remembrance of me. Every time we take the bread and the cup, we aren't performing ritual. We are declaring. The blood still speaks. It speaks over shame. It speaks over failure. It speaks over addiction and fear. It says covered. It says paid. It says redeemed. The blood hasn't lost its power. Here's the real question. Is the blood on your door? Not do you believe in God? Not are you spiritual? Not were you raised in church? Is the blood applied? In Egypt, obedience looked strange. Painting doors with blood made no logical sense, but obedience saved lives. Salvation has always required trust. Trust that what God provides is enough. That night in Egypt, judgment and mercy met, and blood stood in between. At the cross, judgment and mercy met again, and blood stood in between. The difference. This time the firstborn son was not spared. So that you could be. Passover is not just a Jewish feast. It is a revelation. It reveals that God rescues. It reveals that sin costs blood. It reveals that substitution is mercy. It reveals that remembrance sustains freedom. And it reveals that Jesus did not interrupt Passover. He completed it. The lamb was slain. The blood was applied. Death passed over. And it still does. So live like someone marked. Walk like someone covered. Remember like someone rescued. Stay under the blood.